trying to disperse those crowds. They were using tear gas and water cannon last night. Let's speak to Dr. Tinatin Akhvlediani from the Centre for European Policy Studies. It's a think tank based in Brussels. Welcome to the programme. The EU is currently considering Georgia's application for candidate status. What damage could this do to the process?
Indeed, thanks a lot for having me. This can have a very serious repercussions for the EU-Georgia relations, as already stated in the address of the High Representative of the European Union, and so was the other statement already made by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. Indeed, this comes very much not in line, and this comes against the European and democratic principles that the European Union is based on. So for the European Union to consider Georgia as the future member state, Georgia cannot go off the democratic path, and this law very much risks that.
The man that a lot of people are looking at is this oligarch, Bidzina Ivanishvili, the former prime minister of the country who made all his money in Russia. He's not formally in politics, but he bankrolls the ruling party, Georgian Dream. What evidence do you have to suspect that he or Russia is involved in what is going on?
Indeed, so the huge evidence comes on the growing informal governance in the country since the ruling party, Georgian Dream, came to power. It's already several terms, and he has formally retired from the politics, from his party. But every time we see something that is apparently so clearly pro-Russian, this is usually he who is playing through the party of the Georgian Dream. Otherwise, the party should be very ignorant of the people's will, of the Georgia's people will, and the civil society, who's been very actively calling against this law. And this is not the first case that the government is clearly ignoring the people's will and what the civil society has been calling so far.
Yeah, it's very clever this, isn't it? So you have Georgian Dream, who nominally are facing west and want European accession, but they let one of the minor parties put up this bill. They all rally in behind it, knowing, you suspect, I guess, that this will stop the process. And that's why there are thousands of people on the streets tonight. They know what's happening.
Indeed. This case was yet another turning point for the Georgian population, because according to the public opinion polls, more than 80% of Georgians strongly support their European future and their European choice. In fact, Georgia's constitution, Article 78, stipulates that all constitutional bodies should do what they can do in their best to promote Georgia's European integration. So now the people and the society clearly sees that government is doing everything to sabotage Georgia's application for the European membership, which was actually launched just a year ago. What we saw already a year ago, the prime minister back then said Georgia would not apply for the European membership. However, people again took the streets, and it was the outcome of the public protest that Georgia came along with the application for the European membership. However, there were a lot of actions taken, a lot of statements made from the government and from the Georgian Dream Party representatives to sabotage Georgia's European Union membership application. And this is yet another attempt, and the Georgian people, I think, had just really had enough of it. And they are demanding the government not to take away their European future.
Yeah, well, they do have a supermajority, so they will be able to force it through. Caroline, come in on this, because there are opposition forces in Georgia who were saying today, we've got a Yanukovych-style government. Remember, he was the former pro-Russian president of Ukraine that was deposed in the Maidan Revolution in 2014. We've seen this playbook before.
Indeed, this is very...
Sorry, let me just bring in Caroline. Beg your pardon. Go on.
I was going to say, I really sort of applaud the previous guest for her excellent synopsis in what's going on. It's very disturbing. It's in keeping with the fundamental rise of authoritarianism that we've been really seeing over the past 10 years worldwide, particularly in this part of the world. And there's that famous Martin Niemöller quote that Maria Ressa, the freedom fighter, press freedom fighter in the Philippines, sort of paraphrases. And she says, first they came for the journalists, we don't know what happened next. And certainly I think that this has been a bit of a blind spot. Georgia has been a bit of a blind spot. From the vantage here where I am in the United States, Russian expert Fiona Hill actually sort of summed it up quite well last week when she highlighted the glaring omission, quite frankly, that the US has taken to paying close attention to the rise of oligarchy and authoritarianism in Georgia. And it's actually something that the Secretary of State spokesperson, Ned Price, conceded in the last few days. So there's clearly sort of an awareness now of, oh, goodness, what's going on? We've really got to sort of support these flourishing democracies wherever they wherever they sort of land. But you're quite right, Christian. I mean, this is a very concerning development, and again, it underscores this sort of East versus West tug of war that we've been seeing exacerbated really since the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and before.
And this term, Rebecca, foreign agent, it has negative connotations. We know that in Russia it translates as spy or traitor. And in fact, this is an off-the-shelf style bill because Vladimir Putin brought something like this in 2012, and we know what happened next.
Well, exactly. And we have to be very, very careful what we say, but there's a degree of implausible deniability around all of this. I mean, it's got all the trappings of information warfare, all the disruption to civil society, all of the kind of misinformation that's going on around it. It's very hard to isolate and unpick everything that's going on, not least because the president is so much in favour of being part of the European Union. So is the population. And yet you're seeing this sort of behind the scenes power grab going on over commanding what's going on in civil society. It's very worrying.
And Dr. Akhvlediani, what is always held over the heads of the Georgian people is that if they don't fall in line with Moscow, then something like what has happened in Ukraine might befall Georgia.
Indeed, that is very foreseeable, but this is not the first time that Georgians face this. Simply the country to remain independent democratic state, the only alternative and only choice is really to become the member of the European Union. We see what's going on now in Ukraine, and Georgia was at war with Russia back in 2008. And since then, the borders have been moving, Georgia has been facing invasion. So there is simply no other choice for Georgians to remain as the free, democratic, independent state.
Dr. Tinatin Akhvlediani, thank you very much for your time this evening.